Righty, welcome everybody. So, where to start? We came up with what we feel are the seven most important things to get ready to sell. You want to hit the slide to the next one? So I'm going to go through the seven quickly, and then we're going to go in through each one more in depth as we go through the process. So, number one, start by asking, where will I go next? Where is my next home? Am I going to be buying? Am I going to be renting? And when is that going to happen? Know your numbers. You want to set your timeline. Am I looking to move today, next month, next year, in 5 years? We begin working with clients years in advance just to kind of get them ready to go and simplify the process and make it more fun and easier. Fix what matters. If there's any low-hanging fruit around the house that we can fix, update, renovate, or make better, we want to get that done now. Number five is declutter and detach. A big thing, especially if you've been in a home a long time, you have a lot of things hanging around. Do we need to clean out that bedroom and organize that closet and the basement and garage? Don't worry about things that you can't control, things that are out of your control, whether it's interest rates or what's going on in the world. And then the most important is choose your real estate agent early.
All right. So the first step really, I think, is the most helpful step. It's that step that we really identified a number of years ago as people are really trying to decide, okay, I'm going to sell my home, but I have no idea what to do next. And so it's the most powerful or the most successful, kind of part of your home sale is really starting with the question, where do you want to end up? And that's really the most helpful. Your goals eventually will guide every step of the process of when you're selling your home, from deciding where to go, what furniture to keep, or how to determine, the best strategies to achieve your vision. And that's a really important component. And we can help out a lot with that, right? So you want to kind of start envisioning yourself of where that new home might be, whether it's out of state, whether it's local. And so then that way you understand that you can do it and then actually explore those areas. So the most kind of helpful thing that we've found is that when you start going and looking at those properties, so we'll take clients and they'll say they want to be in a certain type of condo or they're a certain type of single family home, especially if they're downsizing or retiring. And then they get there and they realize it's not the right fit. They're looking for something else, and there's a lot to craft from there. And that changes so much when you kind of have a sense of that in the beginning of what ends up happening later when it's time to sell. So almost understanding and getting to know where you're going to end up becomes really powerful for everything we talk about later. And we encourage everybody to actually go look. Go look at those properties, look and learn. You don't have to be buying them today. Nobody's going to twist your arm. And you learn about those things. And it sharpens your goals and sharpens your search criteria. And you begin to start envisioning yourself, which also leads to some excitement and enjoyment. You're kind of like, okay, maybe I'm going to get rid of this big house, or I'm going to move closer to my grandchildren, whatever the scenario is. And you start getting excited about it.
Right. Number two is know your numbers. So the biggest thing here is understanding your current value of your property, whether that's through us coming in and giving that value or just, checking some things online. You want to calculate your equity and your mortgage payoff. If there is a mortgage, do I have a home equity line? How much money do I owe? How much money am I going to get? How much am I going to have at the end of the day once I get through this process, whether it's to go rent or to go buy that next property?
Luckily, they get some good financial advisors to help them.
Absolutely, that's right. You want to explore your buying power for your next home, based on what your value is, if there's any equity there, if there's a mortgage, kind of subtract those numbers, come up with that base number for your next property, and we can help you go through all those things as well. You want to fine tune your goals where you want to move next. If it's, locally, you're probably going to be staying in the same, price point. If you're moving to, maybe somewhere down south where the properties may be a little cheaper, you might be able to get a similar house for maybe less money, or you might be downsizing and going to a condo or something like that. That's much less money. You'll be able to pay cash for that property. understanding real estate commissions. So traditionally, we would sit with a seller and we would establish a fee to sell the home and say it's 5%. We would take that 5%, Dwell 360 would hold 3% for our fee. And then we would choose to share a percentage of that, in this situation, say 2% with the buyer's agent. So would sign a contract, it would be a 5% fee. We would keep 3, we would share 2 with the buyer agent. As of last year, that's changed. John's going to go into a little more about that new law.
Yeah, so there's some new regulations or new guidance around it. Really, how we're looking at it as it kind of makes it a little bit more transparent on how the commissions are distributed and creating a little bit more of a decoupled scenario. So sellers can now choose a listing agreement with their listing agent and separately authorize a listing agent to offer compensation to a buyer's agent for a set amount. So alternatively, sellers also can negotiate the buyer agent compensation on a case-by-case basis when offers come in. So the new forms for offers now will actually indicate what the buyer agent is expecting or requesting, what through their buyer is requesting for compensation in the entire process. It's important to think about it as the bottom line is what's your net proceeds on the sale of your home. We've had a situation where a buyer's agent did ask for more than kind of what the offer of compensation was kind of expressed at. And it was more, and that was obviously something that the seller was attentive to. But the offer from that buyer for that property was substantially more than any other offer on the table. And, and so the net number was a great number, well over everybody else's. So you want to take everything into consideration there. And just remember, all real estate commissions are negotiable. Each firm or each group or each agent is going to have their own schedule of fees and their own guidance that they do. So now to kind of picture that, previously what Ed was talking about, you'd sign one listing agreement that had the total fee. Now what you're looking at is paperwork. That's the listing agreement. For example, with Dwell 360 with us, that would be 3%, and then that's what we would be paid. And then you would choose whether you would have an offer of compensation. And if you did that, let's say it'd be 2%. And you promote that. And then when the final deal comes in, you'd review it. And there's some strategies around that to consider and to think about. But that's kind of maybe a nice way to look at what has changed about the commissions when we were looking at some of the news articles related to it. It's really a decoupling and a little bit more of a transparency of where the money's going.
Yeah, but in the end, the seller is in charge of what they pay for a fee. All righty, number 3, set your timeline. I think this is a very important one, whether, as I said before, it's today or tomorrow or in 5 years. Once you kind of have that soft or hard date, you can kind of back up from there. We can help you plan to get your house ready, whether it's, painting or doing some landscaping, market timing, and kind of put all those pieces together. So we're ready to prepare the house, we're ready to list the house, and, we have time for the closing to get you where you want to go in that timely manner when you're within what you're working with. We'll, factor in market insights as far as what kind of market is going on at that time. Basically, it's the spring market that's busy. And when we say spring, we mean March, April, May, June, even into July. The fall market is the second busiest time, which would be September, October, November. We really don't, it's not ideal to sell in the December, January, February, or even August for that matter. It's the quietest time. Things still transact, but they're much slower. It's not as busy as that time. The spring is when you see the most buyers, obviously more sellers, but the most activity and typically maximizing your dollar when you're selling.
And so much of this timeline really kind of goes back to our first point of when you kind of have a sense of where you want to end up. This can really help you establish your timeline. So if you're moving to a seasonal area that their market is a different, maybe there's more inventory available for you to purchase at a certain time of year, and you want to sell your home before you are purchasing a home, then that might dictate your timeline a little bit. Or if you have kids in school or kids graduating, things of that nature might dictate it. So kind of where you end up also really comes into play on your timeline and how quickly you want to move, because you can back things out in that whole process. So one of the things that we kind of get the most questions about is, what should I do? Should I upgrade my house? Should I renovate my house? And we walk into the house and we're like, hold on, let's just slow down. We're just going to fix what matters and we're going to have a reasonable budget for what we're doing. So we're really talking about point number 4, fix what matters. Start with the small repairs of items that aren't working, right? So things that we would expect to work, your stove should work, your dishwasher should work, the little drawer that's annoying, that's, not opening and closing correctly. Little things like that can be adjusted without renovation. So we're focusing on those things, and those are good things to do, especially if you're a year or two away from selling your home. You could do these little things, on a time or case by case basis. Open permits are a very popular one. We want you to close open permits. That's definitely a thing that's coming up on a regular basis when the attorneys are involved. They're really looking at the permits and what is open and closed. So often, as a homeowner, you can get that completed in a pretty reasonable amount of time. And things like a hot water heater was installed by a plumber 12 years ago, and then you've since replaced that hot water
Right.
heater. Some of those permits are still open for some of our clients' cases. And so they're pretty easy to get them closed. And that's a little task or a simple task that you can kind of navigate in advance. Paint goes a long way. We have a great painter, Marcos. He, very affordable. But what happens with painting is a very affordable way to kind of change a home and refresh it. And so sometimes it also starts your process of kind of decoupling from the house and getting ready for home sale is starting to kind of do those steps. One of the little tidbits we say is, obviously you want working smoke detectors in the house while you're living there, but don't update all those smoke detectors yet. There's a lot of laws and regulations in Massachusetts prior to closing on what you need to do there. And we have somebody that will help with kind of switching those out for the compliant ones. Everybody's almost out of compliance.
Even some of the big box stores that sell the homes smoke detectors are not up to compliance. So
Yeah,
before you go out and buy those, make sure you're following the codes.
they just sell the wrong ones. I
Yeah.
mean, they're good for you, but they're just not in the Massachusetts compliance. Then we consider kind of high impact updates, that are really inexpensive to do, like lighting fixtures or, knobs for your cabinetry, things of that nature. Flooring updates, sometimes a little bit of tile or a little area, or whether we're going to refinish a wood area of flooring. Landscaping, they're pretty easy things to do in the sense that they don't take major construction, but they can give a refreshed look. And that's where we want to avoid is a full renovation, right? For most people, it is not financially beneficial to renovate a kitchen or a bath unless they've already enjoyed it, right? So if you did something 10 years ago, great, 5 years ago, there are cases where maybe a bathroom needs to be renovated, but in most cases, a full renovation is not necessary. A light version can really be functional. And buyers want something clean and they want something
Fresh.
functional. So fresher the better is
Yeah.
really kind of a good guide.
And like John said, painting goes a long way. It's amazing what a fresh coat of paint will do to a property, whether it's the whole entire property or it's just window trim or whatever it may be. But when that buyer walks in, it looks nice, fresh and bright.
Yeah, and you can see in these pictures here of this was a multifamily, and all this was a change in the exterior color. Even the neighbors came out and made comments to us about how much different the house looked and how much better. And we painted the door black and everything else was painted out to this blue with the white trim. And it was a dramatic change without a dramatic price tag, and it's really helpful. It's a good example. Sometimes things are simple. This one's my favorite because you can't really tell in the left picture on the before. That's a pink rug. That was like a Barbie pink rug, and the whole house had hardwood floors, and this was the only room that didn't. And so we had our this great floor guy we have. He came in, matched the same species of wood in the house, and put this flooring in. So this wasn't really too invasive. It didn't take too much work. It was a subfloor underneath the carpet, but it made a big impact
Yeah.
for the sale of the home.
It took an old frumpy room and turned it into a fresh, modern look and nice feel.
Mm.
All right, number 5, detach and declutter. So what do we mean by that? Light open spaces really attract buyers. So you can see here in the photo, bright colors, clean, neat, white ceilings and floors and walls. You want to identify the things you love in your home, and what you're going to take to the next home. So, if there's a dining room set or an armoire or a living room set you're taking to the next home, okay, we're going to leave that there. But if there's things that you aren't going to take, that either aren't going to fit or work with a new home, you want to start worrying about, thinking about getting rid of those things, whether it's donating them, selling them, throwing them out. We work with a couple contractors that will come in and either, take them away for you or can help you try to sell those items. Unfortunately, right now we're seeing not a big market for antique furniture and older furniture. We have a client right now. She has about a 48-year-old dining room set. It's in mint condition. It's beautiful, 8 chairs with a hutch, but there's no market for it. And she doesn't have room for it in her next home. And unfortunately, we're probably going to leave it for the next buyers, which is going to work out great. But she felt that there would be market for that, and it's not a great resale piece. And as you're going through this decluttering and detaching, so to speak, you want to focus on the main living areas, the primary bedroom first, and then we can worry about the basements and the garages later. Obviously, the sooner you get started with this, the more things you'll have time to do. And we can definitely help you through with all of that.
And this brings you back to that original first point that we were talking about, where if you kind of understand where you're going, some of that step becomes easier, right? So you're not sure what your next property looks like, but if you've been in similar properties,
Examples.
you get that sense of, do I need that dining room table that I bought 45 years ago, or am I going to get a new one?
Mhm.
Things of that nature. And that really helps. And it helps you kind of detach from it a little bit and kind of start your move on process. Because sometimes you don't know if you need, like, do I need that coffee table? Am I going to need 3 coffee tables? But then once you understand, okay, well, no, that house I was looking at, there's only one living room. I only need one coffee table. I'm going to take my favorite. And here's an example of somebody who had downsized into a house. And so they had a lot of furniture from their larger house earlier. And a lot of that furniture ended up in their living room. And we didn't paint or change out any of the curtains here. And this was just them getting rid of, kind of selling off or getting rid of or donating the items that they weren't going to take. And then we then staged that room as a living room. And it was just really simple and it changed the look of it. And then another case where, these were some bright colors. It was a really fun house, had been on the market previously, but it was very particular in the style for everybody to look at. And so when we came in and painted the whole place out and put in different staging, it kind of, changed everything. And it turned out they didn't want to keep that furniture anyway. So they thought they had to keep the furniture in the house, but these individuals were moving overseas and they did not want to keep anything. So when we gave them the green light to just get rid of the items that they weren't going to take with them, and that's what this is going back to, is that understanding where you're going. They couldn't move fast enough to just say, well, that's fine. We wanted to get rid of all this stuff anyway. So that's something to keep in mind. So the next thing, kind of this, item number 6 is, don't worry about the things you can't control. So one of the things that people talk to us about is, what if the buyer does this? What if the buyer does that? Well, don't worry about those things. They're out of your control. That's what a good agent's going to do. They're going to worry about those things, because we don't want you to put a roadblock up unnecessarily when you truly want to move and when it's time for you to truly want to move. So don't worry about what financing contingencies will look like and what those elements are. Everything changes. Everybody's situations are different. Don't worry about what the results of the home inspection are going to be. Those are navigated very differently. And now there's a new law about that. I'll talk about that in a second. And overthinking like the larger, broader market, trying to time
Interest
them.
rates.
Yeah,
The
like,
interest rates are
yeah,
doing.
exactly. Interest rates or what's going on in the stock market or anything else in the news, or trying to perfectly time anything. We've been doing this for 20 years. There's no way to perfectly time it. The perfect timing is when you're ready and when you're really comfortable to do it. So try not to kind of worry about these things outside that you can't control. Many times clients will tell us, oh, I hope somebody's going to buy my house. My neighbor, my friend, sold their house and it was all cash and there was no home inspection. And so like that's their barometer of what they're using to guide them on whether it's a good sale or not. And so in those cases, you really got to just get rid of that thought process. Now, today, Massachusetts enacted a new law. All home buyers have the right to a home inspection that has a reasonable time to be negotiated. So, offer is going to be received by the home seller that includes a home inspection. It's state law. If the seller doesn't comply with it, there is a 93A component. It's a consumer protection item. And so we are now in a situation with very, 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 very few exceptions that every offer that you receive on a home is going to include a home inspection. Now, we've been doing this for 20 years. Home inspections are not, sometimes people think, oh, that's it. I'll never sell my house. That's not how they go. They're really a place for the buyer to get information on your house and not be surprised by something that maybe was surprising. And for most part, when the expectations are set for that home, people know what that house is, maybe the deficiencies of that house, or what maybe would be an as is item, something that needs to be fixed or repaired. They might know that in advance. And the buyer goes through their process, and often there's not much, concern after that. You don't have to negotiate with the home inspection or anything like that. And there can't be anything kind of nefarious going on. You can't have double winks of like, we're going to submit an offer with an inspection, but we're actually not going to take it. The buyer can only waive their home inspection after an offer is accepted. And so it's also to kind of address if you had multiple offers that equation should be the same throughout all three offers.
And John, this will actually probably eliminate sellers doing pre-inspection before they list their home, right?
Right. Yep. So yeah, sellers will
Sometimes.
avoid that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's an interesting thing, and that's brand new. That's just being enacted right now, and that's a new law, and there's new documents around it. Oh, look at
So
that. Good looking guys there in that image.
number 7, choose the right agent early. So we love to start with people as soon as we can, the sooner the better, and just kind of help them, guide them, work with them through the process. The earlier you start, we feel because we're very hands-on and we like to guide and supply contractors and such through the process. So, once you have an idea you're thinking about selling, reach out to an agent and start interviewing and get them on board so they can guide you. We like to, once that is established, we like to take you out and start looking at properties. If it's locally, geographically, we can take you and, we're not buying them, but we're going to go look at them. I like this type of home, or I don't like this type of home. I like this area, or I want to be walking distance to something, or I don't. When you're looking for that agent, you want to look for experience, you want to look for honesty and communication. We're big on communication. Sometimes people say we might over communicate, but we just like to give you all that information. And we feel the more we give you, the better off you'll be served. And through this process, we'll work with you to establish that timeline that works with you and kind of getting you to that goal when you want to get to that goal.
Yeah, and that's why it goes back to that point one. Everything kind of really goes back to that point one. When you're working with a good team, they're going to be able to line that all up so that flows together. I'm working with the clients right now. They're, selling one of their homes to retire closer to their grandchildren. And so the search criteria was large when we started. And then that got after maybe a few months of looking at properties before they even put their house on the market. They live in Western Mass, is that they then looked at these areas and then they decided, oh, these were kind of 3 or 4 areas that they would consider living. And then that's what helps them too, is when something comes on in those areas, they're focused on that and they don't go to these other areas that they're no longer interested in. And it becomes an efficient use of time for them.
Kind of narrow down the search.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately, we're trying to say, let's simplify the process. Selling is a process, it's not an event. And, some early planning can lead to less stress and some better outcomes. Also, kind of get you excited too, like you're going to enjoy the process a little bit more. And,
Not stress out about it.
right, exactly. And, it's a big adventure. I think most of the time people are going on to something newer or better in their own way. And then, the people around you can help adapt that process to your goals and your timeline and, partner with the right people. They're going to help you out. And that's everything from a good painter to a good financial advisor, a good realtor, a good attorney, whatever it is. Having the right people and all those people kind of on the same page is really super helpful. And becomes an exciting thing and everybody looks forward to it.
All righty, so those are our 7 tips. Wondering if you have any questions, Maggie or Rick, did any questions pop in?
Don't see any questions. That was great. I learned something new every time I talk to you guys. I wasn't aware of the smoke detector thing and the home inspection thing. So that's really good info. Because I guess in the past, that home inspection was like, we'll waive everything. And then our offer will get, picked first.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They tried, they passed a law in 2024. They tried to implement it in March, and the state wasn't quite ready for it. But it's funny, today we're doing the webinar on selling, and today is the first day it actually goes into law. So if
Wow.
you're buying a home today, it's state law that you have a home inspection in your offer.
Yeah, and we're going to do a video later on it too.
Yeah.
So we'll publish
We do
the
have
whole-
someone that raised their hand. Heather, if you have a question, we can unmute you.
Yes, yes.
you
I
go.
have a quick question about the selling and the buying process. So I live in Connecticut with my husband, who is disabled. And as Andrew knows, we are planning to move closer to my son, who lives in Woburn. And we kind of have a timeline, and we've talked with Andrew about that. But my concern is, I think I'm pretty sure that our house in Connecticut, we've done a renovation within the last 10 years. I think the house will sell pretty quickly. Yes, I need to declutter and do all the things that you've mentioned. So I think this house will sell very quickly. But my concern is when we go to buy, I know that there's specific things that we're going to need. And so it's going to be harder for us to find the house that we want than it is going to be to sell this house. So with the clutter and stuff in the house, so I'm thinking, is it better to, clean out the house, get rid of stuff, put this house on the market, and then say the house sells, then we have to say rent for a while. I just don't want to have to be rushed to buy something because of my husband's Parkinson's. I need to really kind of find the majority of the house on one level. And I know that's going to take a while up there
Mhm.
to
Yeah,
find.
so this is a very common concern or question. And so kind of goes back to a little bit of our point one, where I think if you start looking at properties in geographic areas that you're interested in to see how often a property that fits your criteria is on the market. So, for example, that one client I was telling you about now who's moving from Western Mass, one of the communities they like happens to be in Millis, and it's a 55 plus community, and all the bedrooms, the primary bedrooms are on one level, right? So they like that community. They don't necessarily, that's not the only community they're looking at. But since they've been looking, there's always been between 1 to 5 properties on the market there. So they feel like in the back of their mind, Well, there's always something there to buy, right? So even if we have to sell our house first, that by the time we're getting to that point, to your point, Heather, is okay, now I got to go buy something, how reasonable or how often that is. But now in other areas of their search, it's not often that there's something on one level. And so that has definitely dictated what they're doing. And so what they've decided is they've decided based on that they're going to purchase first and then sell their home. But then obviously other people do other things like yourself is you could sell your home, then go into a rental. This is what I just had my sister do. She's going into a rental until May. She's going to be leaving her house and then going into a rental for May that accommodates, what she needs, and then, doing that. So that's why I think actually learning how often a property that fits your criteria hits the market could relieve some of that stress.
Okay, great. Yeah, as we've kind of talked about the possibility of going into a rental as well. So um, that's probably what we're thinking. But I think we need to do a lot of clean out here before. So thank you very much.
You're
Yeah, no
welcome.
problem. And then often going to the rental of where you're going to end up is often easier than staying where you are.
In that area. Yeah, up in
Yeah,
the Burlington, Woburn area, there's
yeah,
some of the larger apartment buildings, the newer apartment buildings that,
yeah.
handicap accessible with elevators, garage from the garage and such. Might be whether it's a 6 month rental or a year rental, might be a good option up there.
Yep. Well, every time we head up there, we look. So, but thank you very much.
You're very
And I,
welcome. Thank you for the
and I guess
question.
the more you declutter, the less you have to put in storage.
Right,
That's
right.
true.
Yes, exactly.
I've
This
been
is
here
what I was
30
telling my
years, so
sister.
I got a lot to declutter.
Yeah, I worked with Ed and John years ago. We decluttered, took their advice, and then we looked at each other and said, "Why are we moving? This is kind of nice here."
That
So,
is the concern people have sometimes. We're like, oh, we made their house look so nice, they don't want to
right,
leave.
they don't want to go. Yep. So another question came in. Your presentation seems tailored to selling single-family homes. Any tips for those of us who would be selling our condo someday?
Well, they're almost the same things. So, I think at the core of it, most of these things are the same. I think the one element that changes with a condo is what your association is doing and understanding what's happening with your association and, maybe even participating in what's involved there. The variables can exist on special assessments and the work that the association is doing. And so maybe understanding what the plan is there, maybe if something like a beautification project's happening with your condo, kind of working with, that might dictate a timeline. We were just at a property that, with clients that, like 2 months ago, they replaced the roofs and did over the grass. So right now it looks amazing. So it was a great time for that seller to put their house on the market. So that would be, those would be, one adjustment. But for the most part, it's
It's
very
the same.
similar.
Yeah, I mean, inside you still want to, declutter, and if you have a storage area or a storage bin or a storage closet, you want to kind of declutter that and slim that down a little bit, and the same thing inside. The small condos. I live in a condo here in Newton, but it's a large condo. But the smaller condos, you definitely want to have it, staged and decluttered for sure.
Yeah, and with a condo too, if you have a storage unit there, that we would have you start relieving that storage unit too, right? So everybody kind of jam packs those, but people want to walk in and see how big they are, unless it's a small one. So things like that might be an adjustment. Any other questions?
Nothing that we can see coming in.
Hi, I have a
Great.
question and I can't figure out how to raise my hand.
That's okay. Go ahead.
So I've been my husband and I have been in our house. We built it 30 years ago.
Oh,
Um,
wow, that's
and
great.
now our, kids are grown and we're thinking it's time to move and maybe get something a little newer and less maintenance and all that stuff. My question, I guess, is when you have to prioritize the funds that you're going to spend to get your house in shape, I'm struggling a little with what's more important. Is it the, details inside? I mean, I know the basic stuff, right? Like, fix anything that's broken, make sure it's painted and clean and not decluttered, all that. But is it better to, like maybe update a little bit of a bathroom? Or am I better to spend some money outside? We also have a gunite pool that's like 20 plus years old that could use a little TLC. I'm worried that that's going to be a liability. Should I be funneling some money there? Like, what's your experience with that sort of situation?
Yeah, so so in general, we often kind of recommend, depending on the price point of the house, really kind of, you're looking at spending thousands of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars. So whatever we can do to kind of freshen up a space. So when you talked about the bathroom, do you really need to do a renovation? Probably not, but changing out the mirror, the light fixtures, or light changes can often kind of give it a refreshed look. But when
Okay.
we're thinking about like repairs, any buyer that comes into the house, if they feel as if they have to do everything over, that's a problem. Or if they, and so often we can make something look updated without doing the whole house over. And, or something like a pool, if they feel as if there's a really big problem with the pool, we kind of, I mean, the best guidance is if it looks like $1,000 problem to a seller, to a buyer, it looks like a $3,000 problem, right? So a $10,000 problem to a seller is a $30,000 problem to a buyer. It's just how they look at it, right? So
Yeah.
like often when we get quotes on things, the seller's like, oh, that's not as much as I thought. Because what happens is you go to this like worst case scenario. And so if a pool or utilities or something like that are really aging, often you can do these updates to them without rebuilding them to kind of relieve the next buyer to show that, oh yeah, we've replaced the filter, we've updated some of the gunite elements, we've had it inspected, we did X, Y, and Z. So sometimes that can be good, especially with a pool, because not everybody wants the pool. So although I come from a family that we want the pool, so there are plenty of people that want it and they would want to know that it's in good repair. So that would be a good example of where we would say, get some quotes on what needs to be done there and let's see what that looks like.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, and kind of overall take a look at the big picture. If it's the bathroom, freshening up the kitchen, doing some painting in the pool, we maybe just prioritize those as far as seeing what would be the best return. The buyers today, when they walk into a home, they don't have a lot of vision. As much as, all those shows are out there about flip this house and how to, renovate a home. The buyers today, they either don't want to do it, don't know how to do it, don't have the time to do it. They want to be able to move in and say, I can just move right into this. They might change a paint color or redo floors or something, but big projects, they get nervous and kind of look past the house. So you want to capture them and have them feel that there's not much work to do to this house.
Okay. Thanks.
That would be a nice feeling. I don't think I've ever moved into a house where I said, oh, I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
It was always
Well,
something.
I was in a property recently and it was pretty good size and every single wall had wallpaper on it.
Yeah.
And every single wall that had the wallpaper on it, um, it felt like of a different time, right? Like the style of it. And so it wasn't like somebody just did it last week. It was definitely felt like when that owner moved in 20 years ago, they, did the wallpaper. It was overwhelming for my buyer to even contemplate having all that wallpaper removed, for them. And the bathroom fixtures, they were a little dated. The kitchen was a little dated, but they weren't as overwhelmed about that. They felt like, oh, I can call the plumber and they can swap out, the faucet. I can do a couple of things, but how much time and energy is it going to take to do over the wallpaper? And when we actually, so as a result, we ended up having, Marcos go out and he gave us a quote on removing all the wallpaper in the house and painting. And that quote was probably a third of what they had in their mind. It's literally, it's like it fell right into my estimation of like the buyer thinks it's 3 times more expensive than the other. And so then it became a little bit more manageable for them to consider doing it, but it's overwhelming where the renovation of the bathroom wasn't important, because they wanted to do that over time themselves to their own taste. But it was just these other like ancillary things of when you have somebody come in, if they're going to have their friends come over and be in the living room, they're not going to want that wallpaper up, so they're going to want to do that right away.
And to your point as well, if you look into the pool and it's more money than you want to spend to sell the home, you can get a couple quotes. And when you sell the home, you can provide them to the buyer and say, I understand the pool may need some work, and I had a contractor come in and they said this is what it's going to cost. And it's, I didn't have time to do it, but if you want to do this to the pool, here's an idea. So at least you kind of relax the buyer as far as, like John said, not knowing how much it's going to cost. Now they know it's going to be $2,500 to make the pool look great again, or whatever that number may be.
You might need to add a zero, but yeah.
Yeah, right.
So it's a nice pool.
Maybe a little more.
And we sold a number of homes this year with pools, and it's very interesting. I would say it's like 50-50 as far as people that like and want a pool, and people like, yeah, it's there. I don't even know if I'm going to open it this year. I think if you get that buyer that loves the pool and it's,
Well, that's what all the houses ended up being. The buyer that won was the buyer that wanted the pool. Yeah.
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 Well, that's good, because I've always been afraid that it was going to be a detriment. That's even if they wanted it, they would say, "Oh, I don't want this pool."
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe just figuring out what that cost is to make it.
It's a good idea though, to have the estimate, ready to go. So if we decide we don't want to actually do it, at least we can say, look, we priced the house accordingly, et cetera.
This affects that. Yes.
And going back to what Heather was talking about finding a place to move to, one of the things that has come up, that one place I was telling you about where we went to a community and they always have options available, because I've taken my client to every single one of those properties and I've gotten to know, I knew one agent. I didn't know like 2 or 3 of the other agents that were there that were selling some properties. It's a larger community, kind of, detached townhouses, or some are attached. As a result, every one of those agents knows my client's still in the market. So before those houses go on the market, they're reaching out to me, letting me know that, oh, we've got something coming on. So that also could be helpful, especially as you're navigating where you want to be, Heather. As you're kind of building up a bank of contacts, or if your agent is right, then they kind of, you might have a first mover advantage on some of these things, because everybody kind of knows, oh, yep, Heather and her husband are looking for a very particular property. We can call their agent right away, and as soon as we're going to put it on. Janet, I see you have your hand up.
I do. I have a question about buying condos. Um, in general, many condo buildings are larger and are professionally managed. But if you're looking at a property that has just a few owners, which I lived in before I was married many years ago, it was a Victorian that had been subdivided into 6 units. How do you research if there's an issue within the condo? We had a very difficult owner. So it was always like 5 of us were in favor of all these things, and she was just really difficult to deal with. I'm just curious, when you're a prospective buyer, how can you flush that out without, it's people may not want to say what's really going on. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I live in a condo. I bought into a 4-unit, and I've been very blessed to have a great partnership with the other 3 owners. I've since taken over the management and the books, and it runs very smoothly. But we have heard horror stories, absolute horror stories about that. It's really hard, especially, with smaller associations, they tend not to have a professional management company. So, like our association, we meet once a year, but we really don't keep strong meeting minutes. Whereas the larger buildings that have a management company, they will keep meeting minutes, which you, as a buyer, can go in and request meeting minutes and condo financials and budgets, and, ask the questions about, are there any special assessments happening or pending? And what were the last two special assessments? And, how were they paid? What were they paid for? But you're buying into a partnership with people you don't yet know. So there is that risk factor there.
And sometimes those outside factors can kind of help you identify what's going on there. When you learn about who takes care of the lawn, how's that taken care of, right? And so maybe it's Betty on the first floor absolutely loves the garden and she takes care of the lawn. And, Jimmy on the second floor doesn't mind shoveling. You're going to get more knowledge on what the character of those people are than, maybe in some other cases. And so then also asking a lot of questions. So, like, we love to ask a lot of questions. We were in a situation, I was showing a property in Somerville. There was a weird kind of dynamic going on between the first and second floor. I could just like pick up on it. And then I was just asking the agent like 1,000 questions to get him. And eventually he was just like, the first floor and the second floor don't get along and they're in a lawsuit together. Right. So it was like a lot of questions can lead to like you find out who the problem is. And sometimes that person that is there, they just have a personal conflict with the other person that's leaving. And so you might not ever have that conflict again, but you're going to get a sense of that. Like, how forthcoming is everybody, right? How informative is everybody? Is it organized? Like, if somebody goes and buys into his townhouse community, they're going to get a reveal of information. Oh, this is who does the landscaping. Here's the budget. Oh, the four of us get together for, a cookout, right? Like, you're going to get that vibe. In some places, it's like, I don't know. I don't really know what that person does. And you can start getting a sense of that and kind of marrying it together. We had a woman that was buying something in Medford, very, a little bit kind of like a 12-unit condo association. Well, every time we were there, Ed showed her once, and then we did the home inspection. I showed her a couple of times. We were there with her mother. We just hung out in the front entryway and just for like an hour, hour and a half, talking, doing all these things, and everybody coming and going. You just got a sense of what that community was like. Everybody said hi. Everybody was like, "Oh, you need help with something." And so that kind of guided us into like, what's the nature of this building going to be for them? How did they park their cars? Was everybody respectful in the parking lot? Stuff like that. You can start picking up on things. Lyman.
Ed and John, just a question kind of concerning some of the folks that are on the call today, and I'm not trying to put anybody in a category, but some of our clients are older, and moving is like a really daunting thought. Gone are the days of ordering a bunch of pizzas and having beer and having your friends come over and help you move. So maybe you can speak to the kinds of things that you or a realtor could do to help somebody who is, kind of less able to,
Yeah,
pack their own stuff or get their house ready.
sure.
Just kind of keeping that age and lack of desire to do a huge amount of work in mind.
Yeah, we're actually getting ready to close for one of our sellers in about 2 weeks. She's been in the property about 60 years. When they got married, her husband was born and raised in the house and he moved in. I'm sorry, she moved in. They've been there a number of years, and she's moving into Opus, which is on the other side of Newton over near your old office there. But we've been working with her over a year, and basically we just went in and kind of planned the process, kind of put together a timeline with her. And about 4 or 5 months ago, we started having people come through. So we had a declutterer come in, and that person, he takes furniture. And his thing is that we like working with him because he doesn't want to put anything in the trash. So he tries to sell or repurpose or donate everything, which we really like. So if it's not worth a lot, he'll donate it. He'll try to sell it, and it's almost like a barter system. So if they've got a bunch of mattresses, you have to pay to get rid of mattresses. But if they have a nice bureau and some furniture or some antiques that he can sell, he'll barter and kind of say, I have to pay to get rid of this, but I can make you some money on this. And that's usually a 2 or 3 step process. So he came in, he did one phase, got rid of a lot of things, emptied the attic, the basement, left her furniture. We staged the home partially with our things. And now, once we're getting ready to sell, we've actually reached out to the buyer, invited the buyer in and said, the seller is going to a smaller place. Do you need a dining room set? Do you need, a TV? And we have a kitchenette. Do you want us to leave that? And basically they're deciding what they want, what they don't want. That contractor is going to come back and take those items out.
And we did all that with them, right? So we set up the appointment to have somebody come to the house for whatever particular situation that is, and we're there, we meet with them. So then that client or other clients, they get comfortable, like, okay, that person, I like them. Okay, the next time they come over to clean out the attic, I'm okay that they can come over. Or the next time they come over, I want you to come over and stop over and help out and guide it. So they're all, some people want to know what to do and they just do it, but a lot of people, like in situations that kind of don't know how to get started, will kind of just take, we become the son that you've paid to bother versus your son who's off, raising grandchildren. Your grandchildren is, we're the one that will come over, talk to the person, make sure he's giving you a good, situation, make sure it's kind of flowing with the greater goal. And that's from beginning to end. And that'd be really helpful. It's like we're the coach, but also the project manager, and can help just take you one step at a time. And that's what most people, when they're getting started, they just have to go one step at a time to get there. And that's okay. And that's okay. And then you get a little momentum, and then you realize, oh, we can leave. This is very reasonable. Yeah, in that case too, is now we're at a situation where when our staging went in part of her house, because she had gotten rid of so many of the things, she then turned to us. We had put the house under agreement, and she's like, when are you coming to get your staging? Like, I got to get rid of everything. Like, so we went from one extreme to another. Now she's ready to move on. She wants to go. She's like, when do we close? I want to go to the new place. And it's exciting for her. Yeah.
And also just, getting the house ready to sell. They've done an amazing job maintaining the home, updating a few things here and there. And we brought in the painter and got a quote on painting. We brought in the window washer. The home had a lot of windows and, got a quote on how much it would cost to wash the windows and the screens inside and out. As well as the landscaping. So we kind of put all those prices together for her and said, okay, this is what, if we do everything, what works within your budget? What are you comfortable doing? And we kind of talked about, what the best return was. The painting was a big thing. We took down some very custom, beautiful drapes, but they were a little darker and heavy. And we took those down and painted out the windows and washed them, and they looked amazing. So, she didn't do as much landscaping, but she did other things. So getting all those prices to, working with her to decide what's best to do, what you want to do, and what your budget is. It's a lot about budget. I mean, it's, we try to, if we spend 1,000, we want to get 2,500 back. If we spend 5,000, we want to get $10,000 to $15,000 back. Unless it's a defect, if the garage door is not working, we need to spend money to make that work because they want to see things operable.
And then we meet those people. So for some people, that's overwhelming. So we'll meet those people, talk to the garage door guy, get it scheduled, get the quote, see if it's okay, and then get it scheduled. So for some people, that's what they need. We're happy to do that. And for some people, they want to do it their own. So we'll adjust to that. A good agent will adjust to that. And most agents that we know that are good, they'll do exactly that. They'll hold somebody's hand through the process.
Thanks.
Did we answer Larry's question, Kelly?
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions?
Nothing in the
And so,
chat.
and just as a side note, yeah, so if you are going to be acquiring a house too, in Massachusetts, so this is only strictly for Massachusetts, that new law that was enacted today, that is going to be, a new thing. So when you're acquiring a property, regardless of your situation, unless you're buying it from a relative, which is the only category really that it has an exemption, you're going to have the right to have a home inspection. You're going to submit an offer with the home inspection in play, and then you can choose. You could choose to waive it after your offer is accepted if you want to, but I think in 99.9% of the cases, we're going to see everybody fulfill and go through the process of inspecting a home. And I think our general guidance about that is you're looking to see on the buying side, you're looking to see if that house is kind of within the framework of what you're expecting, right? Like we're expecting the stove to work and the dishwasher to work and the heating system to work and things of that nature. But you also know that, the bathroom is a little older and, maybe the toilet is working, but you might need a new one. So you're kind of keeping in context what you're doing in that home inspection. And it's just going to give you a lot of knowledge about that house. And it's a great opportunity because now that should eliminate a competing offer that might have been in on that property, whether it's at the same time or at a previous time, from not having in a home inspection and them using that to dictate whether they accept your offer or not. So it's a nice advantage on the buy side.
All righty.
Yeah.
Okay, we're
Well, thanks a lot.
right up on the hour here. This was great.
All right.
I think we do have a little survey that Dylan put in the chat window. If people can do that, that would be great. And if any questions come in, I am assuming we can forward them off to you after the webinar.
Absolutely.
Okay,
All right,
usually
yeah.
get some.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
everyone.
everything, and everybody have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
You too.
Guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.